Medieval Europe is considered the time between the fall of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Renaissance. It was the time of Judeo-Christianity, classical civilization, and barbarian culture. The medieval Europe period first began in Western Europe. It can be split into three time periods. 476 to 1000 is the early Middle Ages, 1000 to 1300 is the High Middle Ages, and 1300 to 1453 is the Late Middle Ages with the fall of Constantinople. Europe's landmass lay at the western end of Eurasian landmass, which extends from present-day Portugal to China. Parts of Great Britain, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, and other areas of Eastern Europe had been within the Roman Empire. Europe had many natural resources. Dense forests with valuable timber covered much of northern Europe, and the area's fertile soil was well suited for raising crops. In addition, minerals such as iron and coal lay untapped between the Earth's surface. The oceans and seas that surrounded much of Europe were also important resources. People on the coast fished the waters and used them as means of trade and transportation. Large rivers in Europe also provided food and means of travel. Roman roads had allowed Roman and Christian customs to spread.
Germanic tribes overran Europe from about 400 to 700, ending Roman rule. On April 2nd, 742, the son of Pepin of Hairstyle named Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, was born. He was to become the emperor of Western Europe. Before his rule, the western half of the previously Roman Empire was mostly decentralized. Under his rule, he united most of the Western and centralized European empires. The empire stretched across modern-day France, Germany, and part of Italy. In 771, Charlemagne was crowned the king of the Franks, a Germanic tribe. His goal as king and emperor was to unite all of Europe and convert them to Christianity, and he did this through warfare. Through his military conquest, he developed the Carolingian Empire consisting of a large section of Central Europe, Central and Northern Italy, and previously conquered territory. On Christmas Day of 800, Pope Leo III gave Charlemagne the title of Emperor of the Romans. This signaled the tide of the Carolingian Renaissance, a time of intellectual and cultural revival through writing, art, architecture, and literature. When Charlemagne died, his empire quickly fell apart as his heirs battled for control. In 843, Charlemagne's grandsons signed the Treaty of Verdun, which divided Charlemagne's empire into three separate kingdoms, one for each grandson. The splitting of the empire caused its governmental structure to become weak and unstable. The empire was more vulnerable to pirate attacks, raids, and attacks on the town, eventually leading the empire into a time of constant internal conflict. In a time of such chaos, the government developed feudalism in order to maintain power. Feudalism involved a sophisticated hierarchy with the king at top and then high-ranking church officials, wealthy landowners called lord, knights, and then peasants and serfs. In feudalism, lords gave land to serfs in return for sworn military support. The system was a process of giving and keeping pieces of land to workers. It was also the main way of power of distribution in the government at this time. The monarch was head of the state and church, was able to pass laws and appointed bishops of the Catholic Church.
In 1027, William the Conqueror was born. At age 8, he became the Duke of Normandy following the death of his father, Robert the Duke of Normandy. During his reign, he built up an extensive skilled army due to constant invasions to his territory. Edward, the King of England, was William's cousin. During a meeting, William claimed that Edward told him that he could have the throne to England. However, after Edward's death, Harold Godwinson was given the throne. In October of 1066, William led 7,000 troops into the beach of Pevensey, beginning the Battle of Hastings against Harold Godwinson. The story of the Battle of Hastings is told through the Bayeux Tapestry. The Bayeux Tapestry is embroidery with designs showing the events leading up to the battle and the battle itself. In 1066, William had won the battle and was crowned as the King of England. To strengthen his military and control rebellions, William created a plan to build fortresses and castles all over England, the most famous of these structures being the Tower of London. In 1054, the East Schism marked when the church split into Orthodox and Catholic. Catholic Church split due to tension between the Pope in Rome and other Christian leaders in Constantinople. The church in Eastern Europe became Orthodox, while the church in medieval Europe was considered the Roman Catholic Church. The word Catholic meant that the church was universal and it belonged to everyone. Each Catholic country in Western Europe formed a community known as a Christendom, and they were united under the same belief that the Pope was in control of the Church. Most people that lived in medieval Europe were Christian by baptism at birth and participated in the church rituals for most of their life. They followed a version of the Christian Bible that was translated in Latin and copied by hand. The only people who had complete access of the Bible were the church leaders. Christians also made pilgrimages to shrines of saints in order to receive forgiveness for their sins. During church services, people looked at the images in the stained glass windows on the wall to understand the stories from the Bible. Members of the church became teachers in the earliest forms of organized schools. Monasteries held song schools. Young choir boys attended the schools and were taught to read by reciting hymns and prayers which were written in Latin. Monasterial churches were also a place of accommodation for pilgrims, while monks provided food and care for the sick and poor. The church performed a role in the legal and judicial system. Church courts were used to judge people accused of committing offenses on the religion, such as heresy.
After the death of Jesus Christ in 33 AD, Christianity was forbidden, but some Christians continued to worship Christian beliefs secretly. These Christians kept the beliefs from disappearing until Emperor Constantine brought back Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. For the next 600 years, the Roman Catholic Church grew in wealth and power in Western Europe. In 1050, the Roman Catholic Church became the most powerful institution in Western Europe. Christian values dominate the cultural aspects of medieval Europe, especially in scholarship and literature. Medieval Europe grew into an urban society with many intellectual innovations, with new styles in literature, the arts, architecture, and music. Literacy was increased as people had more time to read. Stylistic changes occurred in the visual arts as well. The two major art styles prominent during these years include Romanesque and Gothic architecture. Romanesque architecture was characterized by buildings with Roman arcs, thick walls and pillars, and high small windows. Gothic architecture evolved from the Romanesque architecture around the 12th century. Gothic architecture was characterized by the flying buttress, pointed arcs, vaulted ceilings, and ornate decorations. The effects of Gothic and Romanesque styles can be seen in architecture of the cathedrals developed. Scientific theories continue to be mixed with religious beliefs during the time period. Fairs were a common social activity that all citizens would attend. Merchants would sell their goods, tournaments were held, and life was very routine for the most people. In 1215, the Magna Carta was written by the English to establish a way of government. It limited the powers of the monarch and preserved the legal rights of the citizens. Under the Magna Carta, the citizens of England were entitled to legal rights such as trial by jury, having the severity of punishment based on severity of crime, and no taxation without representation.
Although Christianity was the most powerful religion in medieval Europe, it was not the only one. There were some people who still believed in the ancient Greek and Roman gods in the early Middle Ages, and Sweden was the last of the Scandinavian countries to become a Christian country. There were also a number of people who worshipped Judaism between 1000 to 1500. Their experience was very harsh. Jews were banned from owning land and were driven out of England, France, Spain, and Germany. The other major religion in Europe was Islam. Although Islam was not completely in medieval Western Europe, and the Christians that lived in the Arab Empire saw no danger from the Arab Muslims, major conflict arose between the two religions in the 11th century. When Seljuk Turks arrived in the Muslim countries, they controlled a number of European countries, and they were suspected to have destroyed Christian churches. Christians immediately reacted by participating in the Crusades. The Crusades, which lasted between 1096 and 1291, were a response to an appeal by Pope Urban II for Christians to fight for Christ by conquering Jerusalem from the Muslims' control. The Crusades increased trade between Europe and the East, and it brought growth in European society. The negative aspect of the Crusades was that the feudal system weakened.
Medieval Europe depended on agriculture and trade for a stable economy. When climate got warmer, agricultural techniques improved. There are many agricultural technology innovations at this time, such as the heavy plow, horseshoes, and the horse collar. The new heavy plows allowed for easier cultivation of the wet, heavy soils in northern Europe. The horse collar allowed the horses to have more power while pulling things, and the horseshoes allowed horses to walk on difficult land such as rocky or mountainous roads. When climate got cool, the economy decreased because of decreased agricultural output. Trade routes such as the Hanseatic routes, Venetian routes, and Mediterranean routes improved the economy. On June 4, 1337, the Hundred-Year Wars began in France and England. Conflicts in the Hundred-Year Wars decreased the economy because of the money spent to support the war. In 1347, the Black Plague or bubonic plague killed 1/3 of Europeans' population. The bubonic plague was said to have spread through small rodents in the fleece that they carried. This disease is characterized by swollen lymph nodes that appear mostly in the armpit and groin area. It was estimated that many infected would die within 4 days. Many historians believe that due to the decrease in the working population, wages got higher and the economy of Europe improved.
Around 1340, Geoffrey Chaucer was born. He was a writer, philosopher, and poet, and legitimized the English language since literature used to be only written in Latin or French. He is thought of as the father of English literature. Also, Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1400 that aided in the literacy rate as well as the spread of Christianity. Throughout the early and middle 1360s, he went on diplomatic missions through Spain, Italy, and France for the royal service. During that time, he was exposed to different works of literature and authors. In 1387, Geoffrey began to write his most well-known literary work, The Canterbury Tales. This comedy illustrated a group of people who embark on a pilgrimage to the shrine of Thomas Becket, who was murdered by King Henry II's knights in the Canterbury Cathedral. The story reflects the social and religious characteristics and the gender roles of the 14th century. It shows the generation gap in society and how values in society were evolving into a more modern era and the importance of religion within the English society. His story also showed his support for feminism and how women were becoming less oppressed in society. Beginning roughly in the 14th century, new artistic and scientific ideas began to emerge throughout Europe, signaling the transition from the time of the Middle Ages to the time of the Renaissance. Many historians of European history identify the years 500 to 1500 the Middle Ages of Europe. Research had discovered many aspects of medieval Europe that made it rich and creative in culture it was brought up in. Improvements in political, economic, social, religious, cultural, intellectual, and geographical significance brought greatness and stability to medieval Europe for a period of time.